at City University of Hong Kong's MFA program, and his newest collection, called Deepening Groove, won the 2010 National Poetry Review Prize and came out in fall 2011. I'm so sorry, but so many people have asked if this was the Ravi Shankar of Beatles fame that I need to say off the bat, I'm pretty sure he's not. That said, there are some commonalities. Ravi's are poems of inspiration, and in his most recent book, Deepening Groove, the poems offer the reader a way of seeing things. A turtle, a lake, a bullfrog, compost. Seeing things with eyes that catch the shift and throb and transformations constantly underway around us. This book asks us to slow down, to look, to pay attention to the smallest things, to meditate in a way. In this twitchy, rushing, careening world, these poems show us how to be. In the best way, they say, look, isn't it all beautiful? The compost, the manatee, the sloth. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce our second reader, Ravi Shankar.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was great. Thanks for all of you for coming out. It seems like you have a great community here. I think everyone should join the Creative Writing Club. It seems like you'll have a lot of fun. It is great to be here. I thought I would just kind of read a smorgasbord of poems from some various collections and end with a couple of new things. And I thought I would begin today. Suzanne mentioned this anthology that I co-edited with Tina Chang and Natalie Handel. It came out a couple years ago. And it includes poets from 61 different countries, writing in over 40 different languages, primarily from the Middle East, South Asia, East Asia, and also Central Asia, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan. We even included poets with no real nation, so Palestine and Kashmir and Kurdistan, and also poets in the diaspora, so Asian American and Arab American poets are included. And I thought I would begin today by reading one of these poems, not my own, just to give you a sense of the flavor of the work here. And one of the things that we're really happy about, unlike most Norton anthologies, they allowed us, instead of organizing it chronologically or alphabetically or by country, to have these kind of 9 major primary themes. So we think of it almost as a kind of global cocktail party where these poets from different countries are rubbing up with one another. And I thought I'd just begin the reading by reading a poem by the terrific Korean-American poet Kathy Park Hong. And this is her poem, The Ontology of Chang and Ang, the Original Siamese Twins. It's actually in 2 voices, Chang's and Ang's. So I don't know if I'll do justice to them both, but this is Kathy's poem. Chang spoke. Ang paused. Chang threw a beach ball. Ang caught it. Chang told a white lie. Ang got caught for the lie. Chang forgot his first language. Ang picked up English. In letters, Chang referred to themselves as I. Ang as we. While proselytizing, the preacher asked Chang, "Do you know where you go after you die?" Chang said, "Yes, yes, up there." Thinking they didn't understand, he asked, "Do you know where I go after I die?" Ang said, "Yes, yes, down there." Chang married Adeline. Ang married her sister Sally. Chang made love to his wife. Ang daydreamed about money, his Siam childhood, and roast beef. He tried not to get aroused. Chang checked his wife, scratched his head, and fidgeted. Ang made love to his wife. Chang became drunk, knocked Ang out with a whiskey bottle, and went carousing with his boys. Ang was unconscious. Chang proved Einstein's time dilation while hobbling around the town square from bar A to bar B. Ang was unconscious. Chang apologized. Ang grudgingly accepted. Chang paused. Ang spoke. Chang interrupted. "I am my own man," Ang echoed. "We are men, yes." Both broke their bondage with their pitchman, Mr. Coughlin. Both owned land in North Carolina and 40 slaves. Both were nostalgic for Siam, childhood of preserving duck eggs, watching tiger and elephant fights with the king, Mother Nok, who loved them both equally. The physicians were surprised to find both were personable. Both did not appreciate the outhouse joke. Are all Orientals joined? Allow me to stick this very sharp pin in Aang's neck to see if both of you feel the pain. Is it true that you turn babies into cabbages? We are nice, civilized people. We offer you bananas. Both were sick of fascination. Both played checkers, sired children, owned whips for their slaves, shot game, ate pie. Both wore French silk, smoked cigars, flirted, and believed in the tenets of individualism. Both listed these activities to the jury and cried, "See, we are American." Both were released with a $500 fine for assaulting another headhunter. Both were very self-aware. Both insisted on iron caskets so the grave robbers would not dig up their bodies and sell it to the highest bidder. Both did not converse with one another, except towards the end. My lips are turning blue, Aang. Aang did not answer. They want our bodies, Aang. Aang did not answer. Aang, Aang, my lips are turning blue. Aang turned to his body and did not answer. That's Kathy Park Hong. Just a little taste. The anthology really runs the gamut of all kinds of different voices. I thought I would read a couple of poems from Instrumentality, and maybe I'll begin, since James, and we'll have to ask him about this in the Q&A, was once a shepherd. What was that about? That's pretty wild. And I actually have a shepherd poem in here, so I thought I should read that. And this is a poem. It's a kind of imitation of a very famous poem by Christopher Marlowe that some of you might know, "The passionate shepherd to his love. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove," which he wrote in 1599. And his contemporary, Sir Walter Raleigh, in 1600, wrote a response to that, which was the nymph's reply to the passionate shepherd. I mean, he's essentially trying to seduce her. Raleigh's response, she's not buying it. Right? And I love that you can have these conversations in poetry with not just your contemporaries, with those who've come long before you. So upon seeing this kind of esteemed exchange, I thought, why don't I butt myself into it? And so I wrote the flock's reply to the passionate shepherd after Marlowe and Raleigh. Marooned upon this grassy knoll, we wander lost from vale to pole. Our woolly backs resemble thorn. It's been a while since we've been shorn. You waste much time trying to woo that nymph who never will see you. Since it's a shepherd that you are, you're better off courting a star. But over here your loyal flock needs no clasps, no precious rock to follow you from field to field. If love's your need, we can but yield. Have you not heard us cry and bleat? When you approach us, then retreat. We miss your orders and your laugh. We even miss your clouding staff. Save those gowns made of our wool. No need to make belts or to pull. Posies from the hillside's crease. That nymph is what we call a tease. Just as the hours wing away, there are some sheep that love to play. If such delights your mind might move, then live with us and be our love. I'll read another. I'm coming from Connecticut. I think Suzanne mentioned that, and I teach outside of Hartford, which is known for a lot of different things. Mark Twain lived there, but very famously Wallace Stevens, who was a big influence on my own poetry, lived there also. And for a long time, his presence in the city was totally invisible. There's a Harriet Beecher Stowe house and a Mark Twain house, and no one knew Stevens lived there. It's been rectified a little bit. If you ever walk around Hartford, you'll see these 13 granite stones, and each one has a stanza from 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird inscribed upon it. And it's the first kind of public acknowledgement of his presence in the city. And this poem I wrote after reading his collected letters. It's called Blotched in Transmission. Bark of the birch, airy of the oriole, grit of the sand grain. In the first stanza, I shall attempt to confiscate your essence and each time you will slip through the noose of language, having no owner. Your brief appearance, though, is enough for the covetous page, conferring the illusion of presence. Even the breaths heaving in my chest do not belong to me. These wires of muscle, tapping the hand's opposable thumb upon the space bar, and the precise machinery of two pupils taking it in, are not mine, though convenient to think so. In the second stanza, I shall feel like an outsider in my body. Emptied of the need to own, I become the pit of a plum. We color our language, Wallace Stevens wrote to Elsie Maul, and truth, being white, becomes blotched in transmission. In the third, final stanza, I will understand what he meant for a moment before the old words come flooding back. And I'll just read one more from Instrumentality. This one is, I guess, more autobiographical. I'm always wary of that term. I think most poems have bits of invention and bits of autobiography in it. But I grew up in Northern Virginia and in South India and kind of moved back and forth. I was born in DC, went to 3rd and 4th grade in Madras. And that was interesting to move from American elementary school to a place where I was corporally punished. And you know, as a child, I really lamented the fact that, especially in Northern Virginia, we were the only South Asian family for miles, that my folks still live in Manassas, which is known for the Battle of Bull Run and Lorena Bobbitt. Right? So not the most cosmopolitan center that you could hope to live in. So this poem is kind of about that experience. A couple of words in here you might need to know. An epiphyte is a rootless plant that grows on top of other plants in a canopy. And a bindi is what an Indian woman wears on her forehead. It means actually different things depending on the region that you're traveling in. And a lungi is what an Indian man would wear tied around his waist, kind of like the Indian version of a kilt, which is really key in the Indian summer. Masala chai, they serve at Starbucks, right? So I don't have to tell you what that is. This poem is called Exile. There's nowhere else I'd rather not be than here. But here I am, nonetheless, dispossessed. Though not quite, because I never owned what's been taken from me. Never have belonged in and to a place, a people, a common history. Even as a child when I was slurred in school, towel head, dock boy, camel jockey, none of the abuse was precise. Only Sikhs wear turbans, widows and young girls bindis. Not one species of camel is indigenous to India. If, as Simone Weil writes, to be rooted is the most important and least recognized need of the human soul, behold, I am an epiphyte. I conjure sustenance from thin air, and the smell of both camphor and meatloaf equally repel me. I've worn a lungi pulled between my legs, done designer drugs while subwoofers throbbed, sipped masala chai steaming from a tin cup, driven a Dodge across the Verrazano in rush hour, and always to some degree felt extraneous, like a meteorite happened upon bingo night. This alien feeling, honed in aloneness to an edge, uses me to carve an appropriate mask each morning. I'm still unsure what effect it has on my soul. All right, so I'll move forward and read a few poems from Deepening Groove, which just came out last year. And many of these poems, and I was talking about this earlier in the interview, take the same form. I mean, I call these little poems post-pastorals because they are about natural and artificial phenomenon. They all kind of have the same little form, 4 tercets, 4 little 3-line stanzas. And really, as I was writing them, I realized they were more about the act of perception, how we kind of change what we see in some way. So I'll just read a few of these tiny little poems. This first one is called Crossings. Between forest and field, a threshold, like stepping from a cathedral into the street. The quality of air alters, an eclipse lifts, boundlessness opens, earth itself retextured into weeds where woods once were. Even planes of motion shift from vertical navigation to horizontal quiescence. there's a standing invitation to lie back as sky's unpredictable theater proceeds. Suspended in this ephemeral moment, after leaving a forest, before entering a field, the nature of reality is revealed. This next one is called oysters. And one of the fascinating things about an oyster, which kind of found out in the course of writing, is throughout the course of their life, they switch gender back and forth. It's a really unusual little fact. Oyster. Gnarled as cliff face, two shells suction, one snug in another to shape a rocky pair. Bluish, held together by a dark protein hinge. Content once in spatfall on a piling, changed from free swimming to inert life, filtering plankton from water, beating cilia. Dredged firmaments of bread and brine, now on ice with lemon wedges in a fish stall window. Soft protrandic pulsations in mantle skirts, made liquid to itself, turning males female and back again, telling secrets that require a knife to pry open and vinegar to serve. Read this next poem, which we're talking about the advice we give writers. I teach a lot of undergraduate writers, and there's very good advice that I was given that I then pass on. Among the advice, of course, to dwell in the concrete world and to show, not tell. And of course, there's certain subjects that are taboo for a poet, right? You can't really write poems about rainbows and unicorns. Or so I was told, and I think with good reason. But whenever I hear a bit of advice like that, I always kind of want to turn it on its head. So this is a poem about a rainbow, actually, a double rainbow. And I have to give a shout out to that old hippie on YouTube. Double rainbow! This is my little post-pastoral with the same title, Double Rainbow. Speeding without destination, after dark torrents have been poured and returned at home, the skies above mirror my mood. Windshield wipers knifing through sheets, back roads slick with pooling, when a shard of cloudlessness opens. Pulling over, cutting the ignition, I unstitch myself from the humid seat, still fuming, to greet a full spectrum of color, arcing past the treetops in lockstep with its fainter inverse. Archer's bow, hem of the sun god's coat, bridge between worlds, reconciliation and pardon. They don't last. I mentioned that I was writing these not just, as I was writing them, they became almost a mode of seeing rather than being about any kind of natural object. And so I started writing these little poems about man-made objects. And those of you who have been to Connecticut might know one of our great cultural sites in the state is Mohegan Sun, the casino, which is of course where the old reservation was. And so this is called Mohegan Sun. Where Uncas once wore a wampum collar, hand-carved from purple quad clamshells, a mammoth anodized rose looms, reflective and stainless off the interstate. Come play, a bunting stretched over the road trumpets, and to descend the climate-controlled elevators into the clockless gaming floor pulsing with color is to uncover a spectacle broadcast on a wall of monitors, the fourth circle of hell, where avarice and excess roll boulders back and forth from Swatopoly to the Baccarat table. Time and again, I lose. And maybe I'll just read one more of these little poems. There are other kinds of poems in here, of course, to kind of break up the cadence of that rhythm. But I'll just read one more of these little post-pastorals. This one is called Fireflies, and there's a word in here that in Hotaru, which is the word for fireflies in Japanese, but apparently also refers to a certain kind of spiritual love. And in Japanese mythology, apparently fireflies are seen as the transmigrating souls of the dead. So the conflation of all of those things I thought was quite interesting. Fireflies. Heavy drape beyond the slip-formed stone wall, laid 1/2, 2/1, and shimmed by thin fingers of granite. Night falls moonless in a bindweed field, stretching to a dark grove that flares light. Sudden, incessant, nitric, electric sea green bursts more frequently seen on an arcade screen. Signals a synchronous Morse code of mating, sent from lanterns rung in a rosette, enervated by neurons, souls of the dead in Japanese folklore. Hotaru. Actually, it's love. They only find each other in the dark. All right, and I'll finish off with two newer poems from a manuscript that I'm working on now. And this one again is slightly autobiographical, I suppose. It's I like to work in forms both kind of traditional and invented, archaic and avant-garde. And this is a more traditional form. This is in terza rima, which of course Dante's poems are in, right? You can kind of hear the braided rhyme scheme as you go through this. And I wrote this poem particularly for a friend of mine who promised to read my manuscript and offer edits, but wanted to know what I would do for her in return. And so I wanted to kind of build a case for why she should do this, and so that I came up with the poem, and she still has not read or edited my manuscript. That's so it goes. This is called Barter. Possessed of some rudimentary detection skills, I can spot a Rothko or a liar at 20 paces. Can pan-fried dosas walk on rooftops, misplace bills in the most obvious places, clutter open spaces with dog-eared books or newspaper clippings. I've been known to win at cards or in most races, like upon the blacktop during recess, zipping to snatch a chalk eraser. Can speak if soused in decent French and remain adept at equipping friends for a camping trip. Have even roused flame from flint and steel, still know my knots from clove hitch to bowline, and when housed by a friend, I know enough that dinner's bought by me. Could, if pressed, construct metafiction, elaborate funhouse mirrors of prose that cannot be turned into a movie. Have worked construction, broken floors with a jackhammer, sold knives one summer to suburban housewives, using diction of tang and rivet. Can dispense a kiss that survives the lips, solve algebraic equations, and score goals in soccer. Say I've taken the shape of many lives. All right, and I'll finish with a poem that I'm a vegetarian primarily. I grew up as a vegetarian for the first 18 years of my life, and then I ate meat for about 7 years, and now I eat eggs and cheese and fish. I'm ovo-lacto-pescatarian, I guess, would be the official way. But when it comes to most vegetables, I'm a big fan. I have very little that I loathe, except for one thing that I've always hated since I was a kid, which is bananas. I don't know, I've always kind of detested bananas, and it might be because my father adores them. It's possible that's part of it, but I think it's definitely more than that. And it's one of these kind of odd aversions that I had that I wanted to explore. And so this will be my last poem. It's a little lyric essay on why I hate bananas. Suppose we all have certain foods or odors, like turnips or white wine vinegar, that turn our stomachs. But in most gastronomical matters, I strive to be a pluralist. When it comes to bananas, though, I can make no exception. Just the sight of them blotched with sarcoma like on an old man's waddle, or sliced into slimy half-moons that peek between flakes and milk, make me avert my eyes. Obviously, the Freudians among you will cite shape, but it's more than that. I have a distinct memory of the moment of unconcealment when, as a child, I opened my lunchbox and took out an overripe banana to bite into its flesh, only to discover the true nature of disgust. When I was in the Philippines, I was told the banana plant in folklore had grown from the severed arm of a thwarted lover, buried in the ground until it sprouted yellow fingers. Second year of college, bored and broke, we took to bending reality on the cheap, gagging down cough syrup for the dextromorphine, and once smoking the skin scraped from inside a banana peel, a noxious fume that still fills my lungs with urge to convulse. My father, it should be noted, considers the banana the perfect fruit because he has thrift and cleanliness issues and is glad to eat something that no one else's hand has handled and that he can buy for less than $1 a pound. The world's most grown crop in output by weight, and as fate would have it, India leads the world's production, nearly doubling the output of Brazil, its nearest competitor. In India, it's used in halwas, blended into raita, fried into vades, eaten raw as plantains, and prescribed as panacea for heartburn, nerves, ulcers, PMS, and mosquito bites. But it's not just an Asian thing. Oh no, the fruit has been the source of one of the great trade disputes between the US and Europe, a war waged in the 90s over tariffs, free trade, and the legacy of colonial history. Remember banana republics before they sold chinos? For every dollar spent on bananas at the supermarket, about a nickel goes to the plantations, in turn divided up even further before the migrant workers see a cent. Pumped full with pesticides and agrochemicals, grown on land specifically cleared by transnational fruit corporations, sucking the soil dry of nutrients by leaving no leaf litter, producing more waste and CO2 than any other crop. Once the banana tree is fruited, its crop picked over for aesthetic perfection, the plantation is abandoned to decompose into fiber and frond before it's on to the next deforestation. Every 5 years or so, having been piled on incessantly by the banana files, and beginning myself to doubt what seems such an odd and irrational aversion, I will again try a piece of banana bread or a banana split heaped with fudge and ice cream, and each time I will gag, wondering how I could have forgotten. Potassium and B6 be damned. Dear friends, whether Cavendish or Manzana, fresh or dried, overripe or still green, the jaundiced phallus king banana has ruled our palate for much too long. Let's take a stand against these vile emanations. Leave them to rot in Lady Chiquita's headdress and in the mouths of monkeys. Pray they point their cowardly fingers earthward and yellow back into an arm. Thank you.